Hello, YouTube. When it comes to news, I think it's interesting to note the impact that the internet, of course, has had on the traditional television news broadcasters and their struggle to sort of remain relevant over time. And it's kind of almost humorous sometimes to watch them flounder a little bit and not really be able to understand or grasp what they're really facing. I've watched Bill O'Reilly. I've watched your larger news stations struggle with this: ABC, NBC, CBS News, et cetera, et cetera. They don't help their case, however, when they resort to really, really bad journalism. And, it certainly doesn't help their case when you can watch a particular news program, maybe knowing a little bit about the subject matter, and see how incredibly biased and poorly researched the particular article is. In this case, I'm referring to ABC's Nightline version of the Gamergate Anita Sarkeesian debacle. Now, before I get into that too much, I do want to say I've never really considered myself a gamer. I have restricted myself, or not restricted, but I've just only always really ever played racing titles. I've played racing video games and racing simulators. That's my area of interest. I've never been that much into role-playing games, first-person shooters, or stick and ball type video games. And so, to me, that's such a subgenre, the racing games, that I feel like I'm not part of that group in some ways. Recently, I did start playing, however, Grand Theft Auto 5, and I must say I've enjoyed it immensely. I had initially heard, when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, I'd initially heard all the hype, i.e. the negative hype about the game. And I thought to myself, well, the world probably doesn't really need another one of those kind of games. But being fairly libertarian-minded at heart, and also knowing some of the science behind violence in video games and its relationship to actual violence, and of course the statistics about crime generally decreasing while video game usage and really violence in video games, I think, is on the increase. There's not a direct correlation there. I thought, well, let them have their games. That's not for me to say. I don't really like it. I don't approve of it, but that's not for me to stop someone else from enjoying. Now, this is, of course, because of some of the bad press about Grand Theft Auto 5. What intrigued me about the game is I started to see the odd video where someone was showing some of the open world, free roaming aspects of the game, and the graphics look really good, and I started to understand it's not all just about killing prostitutes. It's not just all about killing, period, that there are other aspects to the game, so I tried it out. And I've been fairly well addicted to it ever since. What bothers me, of course, about the Nightline piece is it's incredibly biased, and they clearly did no research, like even playing the game. That'd kind of be key. What it seems as though they've done is buy hook, line, and sinker the case that's made by ideologues like Anita Sarkeesian. And it's clear that she's an ideologue, because what ideologues do is they bend facts, they omit things that aren't helpful to their agenda, and they single certain things out to make it look as though that's the only thing that's of issue, as long as that suits their agenda. Contrary evidence, we're going to pretend that doesn't exist. And clearly, ABC did not do any background checking, didn't ask anybody else. They only had one fellow on there who spoke for sort of the gamers, I guess. And he did say something that was probably the most factual thing, the most important thing of the whole report. And that was, he said, these are fantasy. I know that in real life, women are strong and, I can't remember the words he used exactly, but he was saying can look after themselves, can defend themselves. This is a fantasy. And of course, this is one of the things that people like Anita Sarkeesian rail against, is that women in video games are presented as part of the plot, but not as part of the main character. That it is a damsel in distress. In Watch Dogs, the video game Watch Dogs, the main protagonist is spurred into action by a female of his family being killed, and so that's degrading towards women because it presents them as playthings, which I'm not sure I understand how that works. It sounds a little more he for she to me than that, right? I understand the damsel trope and the criticism of it, but I think there are worse things in this world that we could maybe focus on than men acting in a sense of heroism to defend the females in their lives. In fact, this is something that men are encouraged to do, even by feminists. That's sort of what the He for She campaign is all about. And of course, if someone, there are even informational advertisements on television saying, if you see someone, there's a teen party and a guy is coercing a drunk girl into a bedroom, and another guy is standing there watching from afar, and they're sort of saying, hey, it's on you, dude. You got to intervene in that. You know what's going down is wrong, right? So to object to it in video games, I think is a little bit silly. But that's not all that's going on. This idea that women are just background decoration. And they single out Grand Theft Auto 5, which is what I'm really going to focus on here, because it's the game that I've played as sort of almost an outsider to gaming, to role-playing and first-person shooters, to give you my take on it, because there was nothing in this ABC sort of news magazine to indicate any other facet of the game except that you can solicit a prostitute, kill her, and then run her over with your car. There's no mention of the other gameplay involved in the game, and the fact that that's actually such a minuscule part of the game that you're kind of hard-pressed to actually find the prostitutes in the first place. You have to go to the right place in town. They don't mention that there are women in business suits walking around in the more metropolis sort of area of the city. They don't mention that there are women nicely dressed in all other areas of the city, and they certainly don't mention that there are men as background decoration. If you go to Sandy Shores, I think it is, there's all kinds of flea-bitten meth dealers and users there, men that look pretty awful with beer guts and everything else. No mention of that, of course, and of course a mention of violence against women. But this is sort of a sandbox type game. I've heard it referred to as a sandbox game. There's the online version of the game where it's multiplayer and you can go and free roam and do whatever you like. And then there's the story mode. I'm going to focus mostly on the online portion because I think that's what most people are playing. Judging by the vast number of crews and the vast population of those crews, that's all based on online playing with one another. It's the most interesting because you're engaging with other human beings online rather than just following a storyboard. And so it being a sandbox, you're going to have to seek that activity out. And so in a sort of Streisand effect style, congratulations to Anita Sarkeesian, the feminists, and ABC Nightline for probably causing more people to go check out the hookers in Grand Theft Auto 5 than ever would have done otherwise, because they're such a minuscule part of the game, you have to go out of your way. No mention of the fact that you can mountain bike up Mount Chiliad and take a cable car down into Paleto Bay. No mention of the large military base that you can have all kinds of fun hijinks with. No mention of the big wind farm or the international airport or the dock area or any of those things, right? No mention of that. And when it comes to violence against women, there's no mention of the fact that in mission play, there's missions throughout Grand Theft Auto Online. In mission play, I have yet to be engaged with a female AI avatar. You're always killing men. They're always men. They yell at you, so if you can't tell by looking at them, you can hear their voice. No mention of that, of course. No mention of the fact that actually in the online community, mission play is encouraged over just sort of random acts of violence against AI or against other players. For instance, if you do solicit a prostitute and kill her, there's no real benefit to doing that. You don't get game points or something like that. There's no mention of the fact that if you do kind of behave yourself, you get these random $2,000 awards for being a good sport, for continued good behavior. No mention of that because it wouldn't be good for the agenda, right? And shame on ABC and Nightline for not researching any of this themselves. There's no mention of the fact, again, that they're inducing people to engage in mission gameplay over random acts of violence because they have these highlighted areas all over the entire island that makes up Los Santos, which is the area that you get to free roam and play in. They're highlighted and they're everywhere. You can't barely turn a street corner without seeing this glowing blue highlight of a mission that you can enter. And these missions, one moment, should have silenced that. These missions are anything from a death match where you can engage one-on-one with another player and you hide around with your weaponry and you try to seek each other out and kill each other, to last team standing, which is a similar thing. You have death match, but it's team against team, multiplayer. There are land races with cars, pedal bikes, motorcycles, you name it. There are boat races. There are plane races. There's parachuting missions. There's capture missions. All kinds of missions that you can engage in. And these are encouraged. And not only are they highlighted around the map, but whenever someone engages in a mission, a text box pops up that says, here's what this mission is. This player is playing this mission. You're invited to join. So you don't even have to find these highlighted areas. You're constantly having these things pop up that tell you that a mission is underway. And of course, again, no mention of that. No mention that it is a sandbox type game. Whatever activity you're kind of interested in is what you can pursue. There are people who do a lot of racing. There are a lot of people who just engage in finding someone, another player, to shoot and kill. There are people who like to invest. There's a whole community of photographers. There's an app inside the game called Snapmatic, where you can pull out a phone, you can take selfies, you can take other shots. There's some artistic lenses you can apply to the camera. And there's a whole group of people that's all they do. They find interesting parts due to the great graphics of the video game, interesting areas to go and take different pictures. I myself have engaged in that a lot. I find it very interesting and it's fulfilling. So it's one of these games where whatever you would like to do, you can do, including being a female protagonist. This is not something that I did at all with the foresight that I was going to make a video someday about this. I play a female character. I created my own female character because that's what I felt I wanted to do. And that's something that's interesting to me is when you get into these the talks of dogmatic attachment to certain ideologies and ideologues and how they will bend facts and mold things to fit their own agenda. I've been listening to a lot of different videos recently by people who would be self-proclaimed feminists, including men. And one I was listening to recently was critiquing a Thunderfoot video, and the discussion was about men playing as females in role-playing games and how all the protagonists tend to be male. And his case that he was making was that when men play female characters in video games, when they're given that choice, they only do it because their female character has got big tits. Well, I'd like to know how he knows that, first of all. Second of all, that's obviously highly sexist. And he sort of was making these sort of personal guarantees that that's the only reason that someone would do that. He went on to make some other personal guarantees that, I mean, how could he know, right? He said something about, he was having a discussion about the pay gap and talking about men doing outside, more dangerous work that may pay better, but how he guarantees that if they had the opportunity to have an inside job, a safer job, that would pay the same, that they would always take that. And he obviously doesn't know a lot of laborers, I guess. I mean, I personally know people who have gone from lawyer to truck driver because they couldn't stand being indoors. They didn't feel like they were being productive enough and they wanted to do something outside. There's a lot of guys who really like doing things outside. There's a lot of guys who like building things and doing that hard work. I know roofers and asphalt layers who love what they do and would never dream of taking some kind of a desk job. And that's tough, hot work. I wouldn't want to do it myself. I would be careful about making personal guarantees about things that you have no control over or don't even know anything about. I think that's probably a good general rule of thumb. He also said something, ironically, he was saying that there's a reason why there's a best actress and a best actor category in the awards shows. Because if there was just a best actor category fits all thing, that people would only vote for the men. And there may even only be men nominees unless you opened up the nomination process to 20 nominees for each category or something like that, that there'd be no women represented. And ironically, it was the same evening I was watching O'Reilly and he was talking about who was voted the most trusted news anchor for 2014, and he finished second, and he was congratulating Robin Roberts for being number one. Yeah, she's not an actress, but I think you get my point. Anyway, when it comes to playing a female character, I can speak from personal experience. I chose a female character. I created her from scratch because I really do identify with that. I know there are a lot of men who create characters online that are representative of who they are. They basically rebuild themselves in avatar form, or they rebuild themselves in a much more heroic form, something that they might, wish that they were. I've always actually quite identified with women. I prefer conversation of women. I prefer the company of women. And I've always sort of felt like I've always had a curiosity for what it would be like to be a woman. It felt very natural for me to create a female character. In fact, so much so, in the online portion of Grand Theft Auto, you can create two characters. And I created a man and a woman at first. Jen is my female character. And through a misspelling, which I decided to keep, Stove, I think he was going to be Steve, Stove was my male character. And I played him a little bit. And I have to tell you, it just didn't feel right. Now, I haven't played the second character for a while, but I actually deleted Stove, and I created another female avatar. Now, she's sort of waiting in the wings. I haven't played her much. I played her a little bit just to see what would happen, because I've got a singular identity on the PlayStation Network, and in Grand Theft Auto, I've got two personalities, and I wanted to see what would happen to points and money and different things like that, award levels and things, if you play one entity all the time, or if you alternate between the two. I've mostly been playing Jen, and I really, really enjoy playing as a female character. Not for any boob jiggling reasons. If I want that, I can get that elsewhere. I play her for the genuine reason that I feel interested in playing the game as a woman, contrary to the assertions that have been made. I don't know. This is, to me, this Nightline piece is just incredibly bad journalism when they take one side and take their story pretty much hook, line, and sinker. And the same old stuff is trotted out. Violence against women in video games, sexism against women in video games, and perpetration of gender stereotypes in video games. And ironically, in the same Nightline piece, when they're talking about promoting gender stereotypes, they referred to traditional gamers as boys in basements. Well, that's not sexist at all, now is it? And they also there was a lot of other poor journalism in there. They reported that for the first time, adult female gamers are outnumbering teenage boys in the gaming sphere. Man, I tell you, there's a lot of genres in the gaming sphere. So I doubt that there are more adult women playing Grand Theft Auto 5 than there are teenage boys playing Grand Theft Auto 5. And I'll bet the roles would be somewhat reversed if you look at a lot of the games that you can play like on Facebook, or the Candy Crush and some of the other games that you can play on your mobile phone. Speaking of phones, there's another one. All right. Sorry about that again. So to nutshell this, to recap, I actually thoroughly enjoy playing Grand Theft Auto 5. I don't find the game sexist in that it specifically targets women again over men. It targets men as well. And, this idea that the gender stereotypes are always negative when it comes to damsels in distress, I don't really buy that argument. Once again, this is fantasy. And I think it is an insult to people's intelligence to suggest that they can't separate fantasy from reality. Or we've got a whole film industry and novel industry that should be put under the microscope as well, if we're going to say that. I think it's highly insulting to people's intelligence to suggest that they can't separate these things. And I think we've got worse things than the damsel in distress trope to focus on in this world where people are being killed for simply expressing their opinions and expressing themselves. There are some real issues out there. And to somehow suggest that I can't tell the difference between a damsel in distress trope in a video game and strong, independent, self-actualized women in the real world is an affront to my discernment and my intelligence, and I reject it wholeheartedly. But this is what you get, I think, when you have ideologues who are willing to promote an agenda at all costs, who will omit information that's not comfortable to them, who will mold other information to fit and to suit, and will focus in on this minutia that's got nothing to do with the overall picture, and how easily they can collude with terrible, terrible journalists who do no background checks, who do not provide any kind of a reasonable counterpoint or do any real investigative journalism, something as simple as playing the damn game themselves. That's my take on it. I'd be interested to hear yours. Thanks for watching.